Hope you had a wonderful time checking in with one another on this beautiful Easter morning. And I just wanted to remind everybody, I know you've heard me say it before, but if programs like Sunday Morning Zen and Commit to Sit, as well as all these class offerings and workshops we do who are meaningful to you, please take a moment to head over to zlmc.org/donate and help support ZLMC. It's our sole means of support is your generosity. And so I'd appreciate it if you'd consider it for just a moment and then stop and make that move right now, because it really makes a difference in terms of us being able to continue our outreach. And we'll thank you for it in advance. This morning's speaker is our abbot, Roshi Robert Althouse, a meditation practitioner for over 40 years, a Zen teacher for, I think, over 20 years, and he co-founded ZLMC about 11 years ago, and it's always wonderful to hear him speak. And this morning he'll be giving a talk titled, Be the Medicine. Roshi, it's wonderful to have you.
Morning, everyone. Happy Easter. This is such a joyous day. I hope you're celebrating it with your friends and family and whatever religious tradition is meaningful to you. When growing up, I was raised a Presbyterian, so I always enjoyed Easter. I think I enjoyed Easter more than Christmas. And because for me, Easter was mysterious. It was, Christ was risen from the dead, and it's like some powerful transformation. And we used to go to sunrise Easter services, which I always enjoyed, and I think that's why I'm still a morning person, even as a Zen practitioner. I enjoy getting up early in the morning, and I always enjoyed Easter. And I'm no longer a practicing Christian, but I certainly respect this tradition and all the ways it's celebrated in ways that are meaningful to people of other faiths, especially in the Christian faith. But I came to this Easter in another way as an artist many years ago. I had an art studio in Venice, California, and then the rents got really expensive. So a lot of us moved to downtown LA because the rents were really cheap there. And I rented us the whole floor of a garment business right in the middle of downtown, this really seedy area of town that was really dangerous, and a lot of homeless people, and it was dangerous. I had friends get held up at knife point when they would come to visit me. But I had the whole floor at the top of this garment business for like $600 a month. So it was kind of a depressing place to be because it was always smoggy. So I tended to paint at night when everyone else was sleeping, and then sleep in the day. That was how I lived for a while as an artist. And I had a powerful vision. This was back in the early 80s. And one time I found myself painting an image on a large canvas of this serpent coming out of the earth with its jaws wide open and a moth or a butterfly coming out of its mouth. And it was this very raw image, and it was, I had no idea why I was painting it or what it was, and I knew it was important to me, and so I hung it on my studio wall for a long time, and then probably more than a year after that, it was still hanging on my studio wall, and I picked up a book of about Mayan culture, and I was looking through the book, and I saw these images of Quetzalcoatl, and I said, that's what I painted. I painted Quetzalcoatl. I knew it internally. It was an inner knowing, a kind of an inner archetype. And then I got really curious about Quetzalcoatl, and I researched it, and I did a whole series of paintings on Quetzalcoatl. And it's just my point of view. It may not be accurate at all, but it seemed to me that Quetzalcoatl was a very powerful archetype of transformation that included both the Canothic element of our humanity, the Canothic earthy serpent energies, as well as the bird flight energies together in one image. And to me, I experienced that as a very powerful archetype. And I often felt like it was comparable to the archetype of Christ rising from the dead in Western culture, but expressed through a Mesoamerican culture in a different way, but not so different. So I'm talking about an archetype here, a kind of an inner, it's hard to explain. It's not something you take literally necessarily. And I don't mean to be disrespectful at all to the Christian tradition in saying this, but it was just my experience. And I'll just share with you briefly. A couple of the paintings I did at that time, I did a whole series of paintings on Quetzalcoatl. So here was I think this was the first one I painted. Can you all see this? Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay. So this is Quetzalcoatl, and I painted this when I was still downtown Los Angeles, and then I painted another one. Let's see. So I really got into it, and I painted a whole series of these paintings of Quetzalcoatl, and so happy Easter, and I hope you're enjoying the weekend with your friends, family, and your whatever spiritual communities you're fortunate to be a part of. I want to talk today about being the medicine. I went in to see my doctor several months ago, and to his surprise and my surprise, I found the words coming out of my mouth, "I want to be the medicine." And he was as shocked as I was that I had said this, but I knew the moment I said it that it was true for me, and that it created a real shift in the way I was thinking about medicine and about illness and about myself getting older. And I need to qualify this because I like Western medicine. I take statins to keep my cholesterol lower, and I'm very grateful for Western medicine. But we do tend to, in a materialistic culture that we live in, tend to treat reality in a materialistic way with often mechanistic kinds of models. And so we think of illness as being something that we fix by taking external medicine, which may work in some cases, and maybe it's overused. After all, the pharmaceutical industry is huge, makes a lot of money off of us taking a lot of prescriptions. And so the question really is, and I think this is kind of a koan, what would it be like if you were to be the medicine? What shifts in you when you think about the possibility of being the medicine? What is medicine? What is illness? What is sickness? So, as I said, we live in a materialistic culture, and we tend to, what comes of that is assumptions we make about medicine, about illness, sickness, wellness, healing, and what that is. And it's often framed in a very, a lot of the metaphors we use to talk about healing cancer or some other illness are war metaphors. We're going to attack the cancer. We're going to conquer it. We're going to fight it. We're going to defeat it. We use war metaphors constantly when we talk about healing sickness. And it just seems to me that doesn't work for me. That metaphor doesn't work for me at all. I don't think that I can conquer sickness. Conquering sickness will make me well. So it's been 2 years. It seems like everything is kind of all mushed together for 2 years of really difficult times for everyone. At the beginning of the pandemic, I introduced to you a practice of feeding the demons. That is a Tibetan practice that I learned from Alioni Rinpoche. And I'm very grateful for her, because she took a Tibetan practice that was somewhat esoteric, that you could only do if you were in the Tibetan tradition, really. You could only do it if you had received the empowerment to do it. And she made it much more accessible and available to Westerners. And so I took that practice of feeding the demons, and at the very beginning of the pandemic, it seemed like a good thing to do for me. And we had actually interrupted a retreat at the beginning of the pandemic. We stopped and closed the retreat because someone had gotten COVID in Oak Park, and so we closed down the center. And I kept going with that retreat, and I started doing this practice of feeding the demon. And I shared it with you some months later in a Dharma talk on Sunday Morning Zen. But essentially, what I experienced in that was the way you do that practice is you visualize your demon in front of you with as much specificity as you can. Colors, clothing. And I can tell you, my demon was very, very healthy and had a lot of vitality, and was very seductive and stubborn. Oh, my demon was really stubborn. Oh my gosh. It's embarrassing to say how stubborn my demon was, and then in the process of doing this practice, you actually embody the demon so that you really get that you are it's not external to you, and then you're visualizing it external to you, and then you're embodying it. And then the practice is, once you've really got the demon there in his full glory, then you feed him what he needs. And you ask him, what do you need? And my demon pretty much needed everything. More. He needed more. He was a real hungry ghost. He needed more of everything. And so I fed him everything that he wanted. And at some point in doing this practice, the demon went away. He just disappeared like a cloud in the sky. And what appeared in his place was this very numinous feminine figure, like a Tara figure. It wasn't exactly Tara. It was something that I can't explain completely, but she was just unconditionally loving, and she took all my shit, everything that I gave her. She took it just took it in. There was nothing I could give her that she would be shocked by or upset by or judging. It was unconditional love. And boy, that has and I started painting some Tara figures because the closest thing I could find in my tradition that corresponded to her was the white Tara. And I'll share with you the first. I think this might have been the first one I painted. Let me see. Here we go. This is white Tara. So something like that. Something along those lines. So I found that luminous, loving, feminine embodiment served me very well through all of the pandemic, really. She was there when I needed her. And so the thing that really struck me about feeding the demon practice was it's such a different way of thinking about illness. I mean, first of all, we think the demon is something outside of us. Whatever the evil is, we project it out, and then we can be righteous and we can fight it. We can demonize it. And but on a psychological level, my practice teaches me that everything to be healed is to be whole, and to be whole means including everything in the pot. And maybe illness is picking a part of the whole and rejecting another part of it. Maybe that's what illness is. I'm not sure. I don't have any clear answers for this, but I do find that this Be the Medicine is a very useful koan for me at this stage in my life. I just turned 73 and I don't feel that healthy, and I don't have as much energy as I used to have. So I think a lot about my own mortality and how much longer I'm going to be here, and if I get ill, what am I going to get, and how am I going to work with it? And so that's a koan for me, and I'm sharing it with you this morning. I have found that the idea of being the medicine really shifts the way I think about sickness and medicine altogether. And I think it's very much in line with our Bodhisattva vow to save all sentient beings. In other words, we vow to be the medicine that is needed for whatever suffering we encounter. And the suffering is inside, outside, everywhere. It's spring in Chicago. The bulbs are shooting up. It's such a joyous time of new life, transformation, and people are being murdered in Ukraine. Both are true. Both are true. And I think we often choose one or the other. We think it's a choice of either or. But in Zen, it's always a and. It's joy and sorrow. It's new life and death together. The Chinese have, in Chinese medicine, they talk about Bian and Hua transformation. And I forget which one is which, but one is the transformation, which is the positive transformation, and the other one is the dissolution. And from the point of view of the Tao, you need both. You need something that takes away so that something else can arise and be built up. But usually I think what we prefer is the transformation that is positive, that builds something up, the new life. But we don't really want to celebrate the way life dissolves or life disappears or life dies. We don't want to include that as part of the wholeness, but it is part of the wholeness. In order for there to be new life, something dies that brings it forth. Christ died so that he could be arisen, he could arise from the death. We have we recently raised I think $6,000 for our Polish Sangha, and I'm so proud of all of you for participating in this and really stepping up at a time when of great need in Europe. And we sent that $6,000 to our Polish Sangha in Warsaw, and they are sending about once a week a shipment in a van of medical supplies that are needed for surgery, and they're sending it to 2 hospitals in Ukraine, one in the south. They've been actually going into Mariupol, and also they send them to a veterans hospital in Kiev. And we raised this money as part of the Peacemaker community, and the Peacemaker community during the last month altogether raised $50,000 for the Polish Sangha in Warsaw. So that just is a wonderful thing. And I'm so grateful to be a part of a Sangha that is generous in this way and sees that there is a need and responds to it with generosity like this. So generosity is healing. Letting go, giving is healing. So I just hope that we don't forget in a month or two that this war is likely to continue for a long time. And I hope that we have the stamina and the strength in our spiritual practice to not look away. And that's really the Bodhisattva practice in many ways that we're practicing. We often speak of it as the 3 tenets of a peacemaker: not knowing, bearing witness, loving action. So we have the word for Zazen in the Soto tradition is shikantaza. It means just sitting. Just sitting. The just, that's the not knowing. Just doing it. Just being here. The just, that's the not knowing. The sitting, that's where the work takes place. Bearing witness is an active participation in life. An active listening, deep listening, deep participation in the wholeness of life, in the joys and the sorrows. And I think this bearing witness, I was reflecting with Sensei the other day. We've done 2 bearing witness retreats in Auschwitz, and I've recently become more connected with the Zen Peacemaker community because of the crisis in Europe. And there's a lot of new people now. That Sangha has blossomed worldwide because of Bernie Glassman's vision. And it's a wonderful Sangha of Buddhist practitioners from all over the world. And they're grounded. And I just like being a part of this group of people, and they, and I was telling Sensei, I know a lot of people that have done the Auschwitz retreat, and it seems to me that it's had an extraordinary impact on people's lives. It had a big impact on mine. I've told this story before. I think it was the second Auschwitz retreat that at the end of it, we had gone somewhere, Budapest or somewhere after it was a 7-day retreat, and it's a big experience. So this is like a day after the retreat, and we were in a group with Bernie, and Bernie says, he asks the question, what are you going to do now? And I really hated that question. I really felt rebellious. And I said, well, I'm going home to Hawaii. That's where we lived at the time. But I knew he had caught me. I know he had hooked me. He had really hooked me, hook, line, and sinker. And I had, that was my koan. We call it the Genjo koan. What am I going to do now? And I went home. I said, what am I going to do now? And it kept bugging me. You know how koans are, they bug you. And so I wanted to bear witness to something alive. It was so dark. Auschwitz was so much death. I wanted to grow something. So I decided that I would bear witness, and that our Zen Center at the time, the Zen Center of Hawaii, would start a community garden and grow a new life. I would just start farming. I didn't want to protest. I didn't want to carry signs. I didn't want to write things about, I just wanted to get my hands in the soil and plant seeds and watch them grow and harvest the fruit and, give it to people. And so I went to the local, we were in Kamuela on the Big Island, and Parker School is right in the center of town. It's a private school. And I thought the community garden needs to be right in the center of town. And they had a big piece of land. So I went to their board and I said, would you let us, look, we want to do a community garden. And I had a proposal for them. And to my great surprise, they said yes. And they said, yeah, you can use it. No cost to you. You don't have to rent it. You can have the land. You can use it for this garden. So we developed a beautiful garden, and I designed it as a mandala, and the mission was to model sustainable agriculture, to nurture biological and cultural diversity, and to build and nurture community. And we fulfilled all of that mission in the 3 years that we did the garden. And I was never happier. I'd come home at the end of the day covered in mud, and I was just happy as a dog, in the backyard rolling in mud. I was just happy. And then we got very successful, and we wrote grants, and we got successful. And then I had to start administrating it and hiring people. And then it took all the joy out of it for me, because I was no longer farming. I was administrating, and that wasn't any fun at all. And so we eventually left Hawaii and went to work with Bernie, who at the time was in Santa Barbara. And that's how we started to get involved with the Peacemaker community. But I remember the first Auschwitz retreat we did in the early 90s. It was one of the first ones that was done there. And they've done this Bearing Witness Interfaith Auschwitz retreat every year since then. But I remember it was, I think, the second night, after sitting around the railroad tracks all day and reciting names of people that had died there and then putting them on an altar, we would go to this auditorium. It's Auschwitz-Birkenau. I always forget which one is which, but Sensei, which one is where we were in the auditorium? Is that Birkenau or Auschwitz? Auschwitz. So we were actually staying in this, Sensei and I were staying in this building too. It was where I believe a lot of the SS guards had stayed during the war. So it was a little scary kind of place, just in strange place. And they had a big auditorium. And one of the practices we did, because we are an interfaith community, Rabbi Singer would take us to different places in Auschwitz and Birkenau, and we would do the Kaddish, which is a Jewish practice. And you sing the Kaddish, and you move your body when you do the Kaddish. It's a kind of, anyway, we would do this, and he was, and each evening we would gather in this auditorium and people would tell stories. We'd hear people that their parents had been in Auschwitz and what it was like. I remember one German man talking about his father who had survived Auschwitz and never talked about it. Anyway, the second night we were there, Rabbi Singer got up to explain the Kaddish to us, and we were a pretty large group of people. I'm guessing we were about 80, and we were in this auditorium. And in the midst of explaining this to us, you'd have to know, if you knew Rabbi Singer, you would understand this. He in his enthusiasm for the Kaddish as a practice, he began, not only was he singing it, he started dancing it. And before we knew it, we were all dancing it with him. And we were dancing in between the chairs in the auditorium. And we started circling around, dancing and singing. And in the middle of this, it dawned on us that we were dancing and singing, and were we celebrating in Auschwitz? Was that okay to do? Should we be doing this? And we stopped. And there was a group of people that were asking legitimately, they're saying, isn't it, this is the second night of our 7-day retreat. Is this a little too early to be celebrating? What are we celebrating? Probably no one has ever danced in this auditorium ever before. Is that right to be dancing in Auschwitz, in Birkenau? And so a group of people gathered and were discussing this. And Egyoku relates the story. I don't remember this exactly, but I'm sure this is probably what happened, very close to what happened. There were people that were objecting to it and saying, we really shouldn't be dancing yet. And someone turned to Bernie and said, Bernie, you got to fix this. And Bernie said, I'm not here to fix anything. I'm here to bear witness. We always want to fix things. It's a knee-jerk reaction. When we're suffering, when others are suffering, we want to fix it. It's the mechanical metaphor all over again. Something could be fixed. I don't think that's really our practice. I think our practice is to bear witness. You start with not knowing, and then you show up. You show up for whatever life is presenting to you, and you listen, and you stay. And out of that courage comes compassion. Out of that courage comes loving action. And that's why I say it's taken me many years to appreciate the power of those Auschwitz retreats, because they were really about bearing witness to the most horrific thing that has happened on our planet in such a long time. And that I can't explain it completely. It's a bit of a mystery, but when we do this kind of bearing witness to any difficult problem, something that we perceive as a problem, social injustice, global warming, whatever it is, when we bear witness to that, then we really show up for all of it. And I have based on my experience, that if we do that, the compassion and the loving action comes out of that, and it's natural. It just comes almost organically when we do that, because we find there's something we can do. But it doesn't come from that knee-jerk react. And you know what I'm talking about. We all have this kind of knee-jerk reaction. We want to fix something because it'll make us feel better. It almost takes us away from the situation. So be the medicine. When we're bearing witness, in any situation, what is needed can change. Sometimes we need order. Sometimes we need chaos. Sometimes we need a hug. Sometimes we need toughness. Sometimes we need play. Sometimes we need hard work. Sometimes we need laughter. Sometimes we need tears. And I think whatever we speak of needs awareness in nonviolent communication, in a way that need is the medicine when it's met. When we meet that need at a deep, deep level, I think we're getting the medicine that's required on some level. And there's a famous saying by Shanti Deva, where he says, "For all those ailing in the world, until their every sickness has been healed, may I myself become for them the doctor, nurse, the medicine itself, raining down a flood of food and drink. May I dispel the ills of thirst and famine, and in the ages marked by scarcity and want, may I myself appear as drink and sustenance." Isn't that beautiful? Then there's the famous saying by Vimalakirti, where he says, "I am sick because the whole world is sick. If everyone's illness were healed, mine would be too." What does it mean to be the medicine? To think of your body as the acupuncture needle that's needed to be placed somewhere on this planet. Where does it need to go? Where could your body be planted in such a way that it would be that acupuncture needle that healed the earth? If the earth is not well, we're not well either. We don't like talking about these things because we feel so helpless. But I think the good news here is that you don't need, and Bernie said this over and over, you don't need to have a solution to the problem before you start to work with it. You can just step in and work with it. Whatever is present, you bear witness to it. And then something will come out of that. But if you start with feeling helpless and overcome by the enormity of the problem, you'll never get started. You'll just be filled with despair. And despair is not helpful. Yes, the times are dark. We may be facing, we're as close to a world war as we've been since the last one. And it's dark. And our practice is to shine a light in the darkness, to find our light in the darkness. You know the story of the Sufi fool who he was looking for his key in the under a light. And someone came by and said, "What are you looking for?" He said, "I'm looking for my key." And they said, "Well, where'd you lose it?" He said, "I lost it in that dark alley over there, but I can't see anything there, so I'm looking for it here under the light." How to be with the darkness without being overcome by it, without being overcome by our despair, our moral outrage, which is certainly uh, justified in many cases, but how to be with that without it taking us down, how to be resilient, how to get back up, how to support each other when we're not doing so well, how to understand that others are struggling and there's a lot of trauma in the culture, a lot of suffering. How can we be the medicine? And I'm confident that this community, this Sangha, is a medicine for our community and for our families and for people around us. So I'm going to stop. I'd like to ask any of you if what comes up for you when you what arises for you when you think of being the medicine. What does that bring up for you? Anybody? And I'm gonna see if I can. What comes up for you?
Thank you for your talk this morning. For me, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry about my clock. I heard several things, and two of the things that I heard the clearest was the thought of you can't come with you can't solve it, right? It's not, and I think one of the things to be the medicine is to come with the idea of not solving, but first just being and opening, and the Thich Nhat Hanh teaching of listening until the other's heart empties, I think is so helpful. And I adore that you told your doctor that you wanted to be the medicine and gave him that moment. In that moment, I'm sure you were medicine for your physician and helped him see things in a different paradigm. So, the other thing that struck me is, when you said you hope we don't lose the ability to connect with what's happening in Ukraine and over the next several months, and I hope that too. And I would, wonder how each of us can commit to a practice that will help us not turn away, that will help us, help ourselves as we're going through this, but also help others. I shared in Commit to Sit that I'm working with mediators and facilitators who are in the middle of some of the most horrible atrocities there are. And all I'm doing is listening and letting them download the atrocities that they are witnessing. And it strikes me over and over again how war is an atrocity, and how is it that then there are atrocities even within that? And it's really been something. And so I'm grateful to be thinking in the way of being medicine and softening and broadening and opening more. So thank you.
we tend to be aware of things based on news cycles. And when the news dies down about Ukraine, when we get tired of it and move on to some other, whatever it is, another shiny object, I'm afraid we might lose our commitment to, we just lose patience we expect this thing to be solved too. And it may not be solved. It may be war for years and years to come. And I'm not sure we have the patience to be with, who does? But boy, are the Poles extraordinary. All the Poles are taking in refugees in their homes. All of the Polish citizens are taking in refugees. Just extraordinary.
And they are doing extraordinary work to help the children
Yes,
and
they
help
are.
them matriculate into classrooms with care and love.
Yes, they are. And the Polish Sangha mentioned children as well. They're working with children and orphans. Of course, there are many orphans now, children that have lost their parents. Well, one way to not lose sight of what's going on is to do bearing witness retreats with the Zen Peacemaker community. They're doing a Peacemaker retreat in, is it Selma? I think it's in Selma on racism. It's going to be pretty heavy. And they're doing that, I think, in July. I think Sensei's going to that. And can't hear you, Sensei. Huh?
It's in May. It's coming right up in
Oh.
May. And then I think in the summer will be the Black Hills.
Uh-huh. And if they can do it, if we can get into Auschwitz, then there's already talk about how would we do the Auschwitz retreat this year, and how could we be of service to Ukrainians that would be there? How would we help them deal with the level of trauma that they have, which is considerable? So that's another possibility. If you wanted to keep this alive, you could go to the Bearing Witness Retreat in Auschwitz. It's usually sometime in the fall.
When I hear you speak about being the medicine, certainly I think it speaks to acknowledging and recognizing our own empowerment, and how, just in terms of literally taking a look at the pharmaceutical invasion of health, which basically has taught people to not believe in their own healing abilities and strengths in so many ways, creates that kind of dependency. And I really love that notion of us recognizing our own healing powers. I mean, even when you're looking at the war and you're looking at the Polish people taking in, and if you think of that as there's a piece of this world that is taking charge of its own medicine, so to speak, in response to the atrocities that are happening. But again, on a personal level, I just think that this notion of trusting, being courageous, and believing in oneself is what I hear ringing out in that statement of being the medicine.
Yeah.
Good morning, Roshi.
Hi, Jackie.
Good morning, Sensei. Good morning, Sangha. Wonderful to see everybody. Thank you very much for real provocative talk for me. I really appreciate when you said, this notion that going into fix is really the start of walking away and not witnessing. And what a great shift for me. One of the things I've learned, with this Sangha and with these teachings from you and Sensei and everybody, is that, my fixing is my need. And and learning how to wait to see if I'm asked for something, you know, the idea of witnessing, not knowing, witnessing, and then whatever action there may be comes later, until I have all the information from whoever it is that might need something. Such a reversal of how, you know, I was giving in the world. And it is a very lonely place to decide on what the issue is, what the fix is, and then walk away with all of that self-assurance that really isn't real, that I've done anything except spin my own tail and walk away. And many times created more chaos than when I started for whoever I was dealing with. So I really appreciate that reminder. And another thing that's come to mind listening this morning is, you know, what it means to show up for people going through grief and loss a bit later after the trauma happens. It's very, very loving and wonderful to go into someone after, let's say, a death of somebody or a significant trauma and say, you know, I hope you're doing well. I wish you well. I send my condolence. But the suffering really begins to mount for people in the weeks and months after, you know, when the impact of life changing really happens. And it's in those moments and that I've always felt are important to be checking back in. So when you talk about, you know, what's going to happen 4 weeks from now, if, you know, I turn on the news and Ukraine is not the top story, it's now the fourth story because it's ongoing, you know, am I going to witness the same way? Am I going to turn the news off before they get to it? You know, so in that, I'm just wondering if maybe the Sangha is going to be doing a second or another type of, you know, contribution opportunity. And that's kind of all I have this morning. Thanks.
Yeah, hi. I found it enormously helpful, and I thank you very much for it.
Some kind of noise.
Can you hear me? No, okay, well, I don't know what to do then,
Yeah, I can hear you a little bit. Can you speak up, Ruth?
I said that I found that enormously helpful, and I thank you.
What did you find helpful, Ruth? I didn't hear.
Well, I didn't say it yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What I found particularly helpful, the part about, I mean, the despair and how omnipresent the despair can be, and for me has been, and the not having to solve something before you start to do something. The last year, I have not done anything in terms of being politically active or active in my community, and that is very different than how I have lived my life. And I'm trying to figure out what to do about that. And so I feel like it's very important that I provide service, okay? I don't think I can do it from the place that I would like to do it now. I feel like the only place I can do it from is feeling that I should do it. And I wish that I did not have that be the motivation, but given that I don't seem to do it unless I'm not doing it without that motivation, so I think I'm going to have that be my motivation and hope that somehow I will get to another place. I also think I've been trying to figure out what to do because it feels so overwhelming, everything. So I've been trying to figure out what to do, and I think, and I've done you don't need to know what I've done. I think I'm really going to narrow my action And there is an absolutely wonderful Cook County Commissioner that we have named Brandon Johnson. And I think the absolute world of him, and he is up for re-election. And I think that and what I'm going to try to do is to focus there and to feel comfortable that that is all I am doing in terms of what's going on globally, nationally, the the midterms that are coming up. Anyway, that's how it is in the house of Ruth Rankin.
You know, Ruth, maybe by just speaking up like this, you're finding a way into it that you didn't know before. There's something about speaking about our, dilemmas that can help move something forward. But it takes patience to wait until things are clear. But sometimes you just got to jump in and try something, right? And see where, and then with some faith that it'll take you somewhere where you really want to go.
Right. Well, I would like to also be very comfortable in the fact and love myself in my with my inaction for social justice, and I'm finding that hard to do, but I believe that that's important.
Well, know that you're loved here.
Thank
Whether you're a social activist or not, you're loved just the way you are.
My problem is not being loved. I'm very, very, very fortunate.
Give a talk here, and maybe that giving the talk will help you integrate something.
You sound like Stephen.
We've all been pretty inactive for 2 years. I've been a hermit. I've been living in my office.
That's not true though, because there was so much that could be done on the telephone, with writing, with cards, with letters,
yeah.
all of that. There was a way to be active for the last election that was very gratifying, very gratifying. And those ways are available. So, not me.
You can always form a circle at the Zen Center and be the steward and organize people to talk about something until you find clarity.
Thank you.
Be the medicine. I love you, Ruth. So I think that takes us through our Sunday morning program. By the way, we had a wonderful Indra's Net event last night where it was just so much creativity and passion and joy, and just a lot of I was surprised at how many artists we have in our community, and it was just delightful. It was so I hope we do something like that again, because it was so uplifting to be in community with other artists and see them doing dancing, singing, all the ways that we express ourselves as human beings. So if there's, I think it's time to close. So again, happy Easter. And please, I hope you enjoy. Go out and